Good morning. It's been called the most divisive contest in decades. Already, some key battle states are too close to call. Hello and welcome. This is Arise News special coverage of the U.S. elections. Our special coverage starts now. Welcome. I'm Ruben Abati.
And I'm Rotus Odiri. And we're going to be getting into the latest results, Doctor, from this very, very, very nail-biting election that has been taking place. Doctor, we just took live coverage of Joe Biden, who made a statement to his supporters to stay calm, and that, he says he's projecting confidence, saying that they are still going to win this election. But Doctor, if you look at the numbers so far, it's really tight. Donald Trump has to be happy. The Republicans have to be happy with the performance that he has put off so far as these numbers have rolled in.
Well, this is one election that has been intense, very close, and has caused interest across the world and trepidation across the world. But all of us are waiting as the numbers continue to come in. Initially, it was the early votes. And now we're getting the re-voting numbers. But the key states are the battleground states.
Battleground states,
The battleground states, Ohio, Florida,
yes,
Texas, Wyoming, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and, well, one or two of those battleground states have already gone red.
They have.
But we'll keep looking at what goes red,
yes,
what goes blue. But we'll also be getting live and detailed analysis from our international correspondents, Laurie Lade, Rotimi Kade, and Dan Warren, who are all on the ground internationally.
All right, so we're going to take a look at the figures that have come in. Doctor, this is key here. This is key on our video wall with respect to the numbers that were coming in and the method through which each candidate, U.S. President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, are taking in the numbers. This was, of course, pre-election voting. Mail-in ballots that have been cast so far. Remember, they were talking about historical numbers that came in. 102 million so far. So 63.8 million ballots have been cast already. Doctor, these are still being counted. In fact, most of them haven't been counted yet in the blue wall. That is the Rust Belt states. You've already mentioned them. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Parts of those states, these are still coming in. In-person votes, this is where Donald Trump has made he's made progress over the night, in that the in-person votes, he has managed to catch up and overperform in the states that he needed to hold. So total pre-election, we had 102 million. It is the method through which these numbers have been coming in that is determining what we are seeing now, because the mail-in ballots were mostly Democratic for the Democrats, right? The more in-person vote, and this was, of course, due to the coronavirus, the fears of social distancing and so on and so forth. So the in-person votes are where U.S. President Donald Trump has been making inroads. Of course, we know that the number for our viewers, the magical number is 270. Joe Biden, I think, is about 208, 205 right now. Donald Trump is about 132, 135 as of last count. But it is the method through which these votes, again, look at this, Doctor, percentage of 2016 total 73%. A lot was made about these numbers that came in earlier. While we're seeing right now, and Joe Biden's hopes, where things stand right now in Pennsylvania, which is 20 electoral votes, in Michigan, 16 electoral votes, in Wisconsin, I think about 10 or 11 electoral votes. Those three states, those mail-in ballots, the next ones that are coming in, they have to come in for
what
Biden.
we have also seen is that, President Trump has underperformed in certain counties in which he performed very well in the 2016 election. And we have seen Joe Biden doing better in those counties where the Republicans did well in 2016.
Indeed.
What it means, that illustrates the fact that this is a hotly contested election. We've seen blue counties turning red. We've seen red counties turning blue. But as at the last few minutes, last hour, we've also seen that, this trepidation that I talked about earlier is real, because it looks like President Trump, with this election day voting that you drew attention to earlier, may be able to turn the bend.
That's why Biden came out. I think we're going to put up, if we get Florida, of course, because Florida was supposed to be a knockout blow, hopefully an early knockout blow for Biden. Yes, here we are. So with 96% of the precincts reporting as of last count, 29 electoral votes, you can see Trump there at 51.2%, 47.8% for Biden. Some of the networks have already called Florida for Trump. Key 29 electoral votes. He beat Hillary Clinton by about 1.4 percentage points. He overperformed here. He actually did better, but he's leading Biden by about 3 or 3.2 percentage points. One of the reasons is this, Doctor. In this region of Florida, Miami, the counties, thank you that you mentioned, Miami-Dade. As we've seen, Joe Biden underperformed with Hispanics in Miami-Dade. Hillary Clinton actually performed better than he did because she ran up the score in the Miami-Dade county. Unfortunately for Biden, he underperformed in Hispanics. Trump did better with Hispanics, and that is the reason why Florida has already been called for Trump. Had Biden been able to take Florida, then we could have said that Trump was in trouble. But this is a big win for Donald Trump. Again, 96% of the precincts reporting. Most of the precincts that are still coming in, I think this is St. Petersburg up here, but Miami-Dade was the big Democratic stronghold. Unfortunately, those key 29 electoral votes, they have already projected to go to Donald Trump.
Well, you know the key states. California is originally Democrat.
Yes, 55 electoral votes.
California has always voted Democrat since 1980.
Indeed.
And every president since 1960 that got Ohio. And Ohio is going the way of President Trump. Every president that has won Ohio since 1960 has won the presidency.
Indeed.
And I can see already on Nigerian Twitter that supporters of President Trump in Nigeria are already saying, oh, it looks like the old man died. But still, it's still too early to call.
Exactly.
Yes.
We cannot say it's over. I think there's another key state. There was also Pennsylvania, I believe. This is another really, really key state. Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, isn't that Vice President Joe Biden's constituency?
Scranton. And funny enough, Trump, as the counties have come in, Trump has already taken Scranton. Now, the thing is, Philadelphia is one of the capital of Pennsylvania. A lot of African-American support there, with 58% of the precincts reporting, and there's still a long way to go, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Trump up 57% to 57%. Biden 41.7. So Pennsylvania, this is a Biden. They both need this state. Now, this is where those mail-in ballots come in. As far as the mail-in ballot numbers are coming in, Biden is hopeful that when the figures come in, mail-in ballots come in, he will catch up with Trump, because as of right now, Trump is leading him. This is part of the blue wall. This is one of the key blue wall states in the Rust Belt that Hillary Clinton lost, that had been reliably Democratic. Obama carried Pennsylvania in 2008. He carried it in 2012. Even John Kerry, that was walloped by George W. Bush in 2004, he also carried Pennsylvania. But Trump defied the odds, and the polls, Doctor, polls are another matter.
President Trump appears to have won Ohio, Florida, Texas, while Biden has taken Michigan and Arizona.
It's something else. Let's bring in
really a very closely contested election.
Let's bring in Rufai. How are you seeing things so far from your vantage point?
Rotus, we've all been up crunching numbers from about 1 o'clock this morning. Really very exciting election, and it is flipped. I should tell you that for free. A lot of the Democrats thought that Pennsylvania was going to be in the bag for them. Joe Biden is still saying, let's hope on those votes when they come in, those mail-in ballot, but it's not really looking that way. I'm excited you talk about Miami-Dade. It's really very important because Hillary Clinton won Miami-Dade about 66 to 33% the last elections, but this time around, Joe Biden was struggling in Miami-Dade in Florida area. So that county is not looking for good for Joe Biden. And even the shocking part for me, Rotus, is at a point in this election, Joe Biden was being beaten in Scranton by Donald Trump. Exactly. That's supposed to be his own county.
Right. It reminds me of Al Gore in Tennessee. In 2004, when he lost Tennessee to George W. Bush.
That was in 2000 elections, Rotus. 2000 elections.
2000, thank you. 2000 elections. When he lost that to George W. Bush.
So it's quite shocking. So let's look at the numbers. Let's look when Penn comes in, Pennsylvania comes in. Let's look when Georgia comes in, because Georgia has got 16 electoral college votes. Let's look when states like Arizona come in. Arizona is up in the winds now. The Biden group, that's the Democratic Party, is doing quite well in Arizona. Let's look when states like Ohio has been given to Trump Trump already. Trump got Ohio. Let's look where Michigan comes in. But this talk by the Joe Biden camp that when our mail-in votes come, it's getting a little bit too late, because don't forget that when the mail-in votes come, you'll have to share it too with some Republican votes, because majority of Democratic Party members voted mail-in votes, but don't forget that there's some Republicans too that had early voting too with them. So let's look at those areas critically, but it's going to go down to the wire. It's going to go down to those states. 16 electoral college votes, 20 in Pennsylvania electoral college votes. These things are up for grabs, and let's see how it pans out. But these elections definitely will go down to the wire. In fact, from what I'm hearing, it could go up to Wednesday, Thursday morning to finish counting all the mail-in votes. It could go up to Wednesday, Thursday morning, because these are pouring in, and we need to look at them critically.
But in spite of all of this, with President Trump taking Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Michigan, Georgia, Virginia, and maybe Arkansas.
If he takes
if you look at the electoral votes, because it's the electoral map that matters, Biden has, as at this moment, 237.
Right.
Opposed to Trump's 213.
And so it's close.
But
it is
still
close. It is
so
still very, very
close. We shouldn't jump to
very
any
close.
conclusions at this moment. 237 to 213. Popular vote for Biden, 49.8%. And for President Trump, 48.6%.
It's again, and I think we just looked at Rufai, excellent points of view, and Dr. excellent points of view. We've looked at Florida, we've looked at Pennsylvania. I believe Michigan is another incredibly key. Okay, so this is as of the last count. So to have this at 209 to 118 earlier, but and a lot of the different outlets are calling this cautiously, very cautiously. But again, the key number to get to is 270. Based on, of course, what you need to clinch it. If you look at Michigan...
No, but the number is different now.
Yes, it's been updated, exactly.
239 to 213.
To 213 for Trump.
237 to 213.
Indeed. And again, if you look at, I think Michigan is another key state that needs to come in. Trump is also leading as well in the count in Michigan, but it is going to be critical. Yes, here we go. So with about, as of last count, 56% of precincts reporting key 16 electoral votes. This is again part of that blue wall that makes up the defense for the Democrats. Trump at 54% of the share of the votes, Biden at 44.2%. This is what Rufai was talking about. This is what you just mentioned. It's the mail-in votes that come in. Biden has to make up those numbers in Michigan, because if he falls in Pennsylvania, if he falls in Michigan, if he falls, I think we also have Wisconsin as well. If he falls in Wisconsin, then Donald Trump would have defied the odds for a second time, with the polls having him behind.
Well, quite rightly. I mean, as at this moment, we don't know what will happen at the end of the day. But the issue is to just look at the electoral map, not necessarily the popular votes. But you could also have a situation whereby President Trump wins the popular votes and then he loses
in the electoral college.
I mean, in the last 2-3 elections, 2 presidents got in through the electoral college. Trump and also President Trump.
Yes.
Then you could have a situation where there will be a reversal, and you could have the Democrats losing maybe perhaps the popular votes, but winning at the level of the electoral college. And that's why those battleground swing states are very important.
Incredibly important. So as of right now, it's a game of turnouts. And that is something that the Trump administration has been... They've been successful at doing it because the coronavirus pandemic forced the Biden and the Democrats to limit themselves to digital means of reaching out to supporters, sending text messages, emails, and so on. Trump and the Republicans actually had an active ground game where they were going to knock on doors and try to get their base to come out. What was believed was that Donald Trump had to extend beyond his base to get extra voters, people of color, women, and so on and so forth. But it looks like so far, again, we have to be very careful before we call this for anybody. It looks like he's been successful in being able to mine more people to come out from his base, which is mostly non-college educated whites to push his numbers upwards. So it's I have to say the president, if this holds, Doctor, for him to have defied the odds a second time with the polls showing first Hillary Clinton ahead in 2016 and now Biden in 2020.
Well, if he does, I will attribute that to luck. But what we have is that in New York, with 67% in, Biden is leading.
Yes.
In Oklahoma, with 99% in, Biden is leading. In Oregon, Biden is leading. In Tennessee, President Trump is leading with 60.8%. And in Washington, Biden is also leading with 61%. In Vermont, Biden is also leading. In Wisconsin, Trump is leading with 51.2%, with 85% in. And with 89% in Alabama, President Trump is leading with 64.1%. So it's really a very tight race.
Indeed.
In Connecticut,
yes,
Biden is leading.
Indeed.
In Georgia, President Trump is leading with 52.2%.
And so a number of the states you've mentioned can be considered safe states. So New York was definitely going to go for a Biden, and Alabama was going to go for a Trump. So with a number of those safe states that are there, those are the states that are already baked into the electoral map and they could have counted on. The key again is those battleground states. It's a war of attrition to where the electoral mathematics says that Biden, to be successful, had to flip a state that Trump won in 2016. So far, I believe it's only Arizona and I think New Hampshire that he's been able to do that so far. What do you think?
But the thing is, Rotus, you have to understand that it's quite very clear, because I raised this yesterday. A lot of people kept on talking about, Biden is leading by 5 points. But I kept on saying, when you check the polls, one thing we don't do is we don't look at the margin of errors. And the margin of error was saying a lot as regards the poll. The margin of error was plus or minus 5. So when you think Biden was leading by 5 points, it could have been 1 point. It could have been neck and neck. And that is what is happening. Flipping states, yes. Biden needs to flip a couple of states because Trump too has flipped some states. Don't forget, Wisconsin used to be the heartland of the Democratic Party. In fact, there used to be a big joke among the Democratic Party that says, even Michael Dukakis, that did so bad in the 88 elections, won Wisconsin. But you can see now, since Hillary Clinton lost Wisconsin, thinking it was a safe seat, Trump has got it, and Trump might be winning and consolidating on Wisconsin because he's doing quite well in Wisconsin. Those are the areas we should look at very critically, and those are the areas we should study. But these, the pollsters really were not far from the truth, because when you see what was happening on ground, and you spoke very glowingly about it, that Trump did his homework, he went into the areas, and what the Democratic Party thought was going to decide the election didn't decide the election. It's obvious they thought COVID was going to be a big deciding factor for votes, but it didn't. I'll give you an instance. For Pennsylvania, what really moved the voters in Pennsylvania is fracking. It's the talk about fracking, the talk about the energy sector. Those are the conversations the voters want to have. So largely, I once called it a coronavirus election, but it's looking at it's not a coronavirus election. It was an election pretty much based on taxes and the economy right now. Because it's obvious from the people that voted Trump, they don't want an increase in taxes. They don't want fracking to go away. They want to make some money out of the oil industry in Pennsylvania. And when you check across the states, that's what is happening. And one other thing Joe Biden too enjoyed in states like Arizona was individual brilliance. Don't forget the astronaut Mark Kelly is in Arizona. He might be a senator to come out of Arizona. Don't forget Arizona used to be the heartland of the Republican Party.
Yes.
The big John McCain was from Arizona. Former presidential candidate John McCain was from Arizona that ran a couple of times, and Arizona was always a safe bet. But now things are changing in Arizona as it is changing in other parts of America. So this election is one, for the history books where we need to watch critically and watch across the states. You talked about Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky. Those states, definitely the Republicans will get them. Those are sort of like the red states already. You talked about Idaho. Trump was going to get Idaho. Why? Because Trump invested a lot in farmers. In fact, recently Trump was made a patron of the Farmers Union in America. That was a big deal for them. And don't forget that Idaho produced the largest amount of potatoes in America.
Yes.
So when you see states like that, obviously 2-3 electoral college votes, Trump was going to get them.
But
and definitely when you look at states like Maine too, split electoral college votes. And also states I want you to check out is states like Nebraska. Rotus, if you don't forget, Nebraska does split its electoral college votes. There are some states that split the electoral college vote, which Nebraska is one of them. So, and it's got about 3 electoral college votes. And when they split it, let's see where it will go to make up the whole calculation.
Well, definitely it's still too early to call. We cannot make definitive comments at this moment. We just have to wait as the figures come in, because apart from the early votes and election day votes, you see that President Trump has done much better in rural America than in the urban centers. But meanwhile, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden says he's confident he will win the U.S. presidential election, but he's cautioning his supporters to wait until every vote is counted. Elsewhere, Republican...
Your patience is commendable. We knew this was going to go long, but who knew we're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania.
Doctor, what do you make of Biden's speech there, telling his supporters
well,
that...
it's a way, again, of building confidence and showing hope and showing that it is not over until it is over. And the Democrats have shown great confidence in this highly contested election. But, I mean, we should also look at the Senate elections. Elsewhere, Republicans suffered a first setback in the battle for Senate control as Democrats picked up a seat in Colorado, but the Republicans ousted a Democrat in Alabama. Well-known Republicans held on in South Carolina and Texas. So you see how hotly contested it is. Not just the presidential election, but also the battle for Congress. And invariably, this is an election that is a battle for the soul of America, as it were. Republicans sought to retain their Senate majority against a surge of Democrats, challenging President Donald Trump's allies across a vast political map. Both parties saw paths to victory, and the outcome might not be known on election night. In Colorado, Republican Cory Gardner was among the most endangered senators. His state has shifted leftward in the Trump era, and Democrat John Hickenlooper, a former governor, won the seat, while House confidant Lindsey Graham survived the fight of his political life in South Carolina against Democrat Jamie Harrison, whose campaign stunned Washington by drawing more than $100 million in small-scale donations. In Texas, Senator John Cornyn turned back Democrat M.J. Hager, a former Air Force helicopter pilot, in his hardest-fought election in almost 2 decades. Republican Senate Majority Mitch McConnell has won a 7th term in Kentucky. We take a short break. When we return, the coverage of the American election will continue.
Welcome back to this special edition on Arise News covering the U.S. elections. America decides. Doctor, let's take a look for our viewers at this tweet from U.S. President Donald Trump as the results were coming in. I want to get your Rufa. I also want to get your take on this tweet. We are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls, and he misspelled polls, after the polls are closed. Rufai, you know, there's been a lot of other, Doctor, let me start with you. There's been a lot of talk about President Trump undermining U.S. democracy with language like this, saying that he didn't trust mail-in ballots, that they are fraudulent. Now here he is, while the votes are being counted, accusing the other side of stealing the election. Some say he sent that tweet out because he fears that Biden's speech, which we just played for our viewers, where he said, don't worry, calm down, when the mail-in ballots come in, we will win this election. Is Trump trying to throw doubts on those numbers when they come in?
We shouldn't be surprised. Even before the election day, President Trump had even expressed concern about the likelihood of violence in case he does not win. That's the practical implication of what he said at that point. And I mean, he had also made it very clear that he and his supporters would challenge the outcome of the election. Before the election, we had lawyers on both sides already getting ready to go to court to challenge the count. But the big concern for the rest of the world is that this is not just one of the most divisive elections in American history. It's also one of the most difficult, with the incumbent saying that he must win by all means possible. So if he has sent out this tweet, this is an indication, of course, that he maybe is already anxious, he's already afraid, because as the numbers come in of the voting day counts from one county to another, from one state to the other, we see clearly that, you know, it's changing. Red is changing to blue. Blue is gaining a few more grounds.
Yes.
And that in itself is a cause for concern. But we just hope that at the end of the day, there will be no outbreak of violence.
Right.
Because one of the major pre-election concerns has been that you could have in the United States a typical third world election whereby there will be violence. But of course, President Trump is also saying that he will deliver an address following in the footsteps of Vice President Joe Biden. And he's saying that the battleground states are still too close to call.
Rufai, what do you make of it?
I mean, Rotus, I saw this coming, obviously. In fact, I think it was Axion that put out a statement, you know, the website and the Scoop in America, that put out a statement that said at some point Trump will want to call the elections early. A lot of people have debunked that. The Trump team has said, definitely, we're not going to do that. I saw Kelly and Conway speaking, former counselor to President Donald Trump, speaking this morning. I said, obviously, that will not happen. But the truth has to be said. This has been fought over the lines. In fact, don't forget, it was only 3 or 4 days ago, or 2 days ago, I should say, that he got a court ruling to the effect that they can count votes a couple of days after in states like Penn and the likes. In fact, the state Supreme Court had to rule on that. And that's still in the works, you know, that's still on the cards. Joe Shapiro, the leader of Joe Biden's legal team, was talking the other day, and he says, you know what, we're going to get all our lawyers in there. We're going to ensure that these votes are counted. It could take 2-3 days. And like I said before, when the mail-in ballots started coming, it could take up to Thursday morning before we know the final vote in some areas. So I saw this coming. Trump would send tweets like this out of the fact that he's on tenterhook and the likes. But the truth has to be said. That's just quintessential Trump. What is on ground is that we all see there's going to be a resurgence when the mail-in ballots start to come in. And guess what? Well over 100 million Americans went through that route of a mail-in ballot because of the coronavirus and the exigencies of the global pandemic going on in the world. And you can't push that out. Democrats, by nature, historically always like to vote early. So when those numbers start to come in big, we're going to see. But Trump, on the flip side, should be excited. Ohio was on tenterhooks for him, but he got Ohio. At some point, in fact, don't forget that Biden was first leading Ohio before Trump finally got Ohio. And at some point, there was a scoop out of the White House that said Trump was on tenterhooks, but his people said, calm down, the numbers will flip in our favor in Ohio. And don't forget, that great group that will also decide this election is the suburban women, the suburban wives. And Trump has been calling on them to be able to bridge the gap for him. But those key states remain sacrosanct. Amidst all of this, let's not also forget, the Democrats have taken the House already. Nancy Pelosi, early this morning, around 3 o'clock this morning, gave a statement talking about the fact that, they're in the House. She might probably return as the Speaker. How is Trump going to navigate his way through with Nancy Pelosi being the Speaker?
Indeed.
He's in for another one.
Let's go to the U.S. now to speak with Rotimi Kade, who is going to also, Arise correspondent Rotimi Kade, to get his take on the latest with the figures coming in and where things stand right now. Rotimi, I think it's good morning to you, yes, where you are now, or is it good evening over in the States? What's your take on these numbers coming in and the state of the race? I also want to hear what you think about that Trump tweet as well, Rotimi.
Well, first of all, good morning, guys. It's very early here. And to start with, I think the pollsters in the United States have got it wrong again, just like what we had in 2016, where it was projected that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton would definitely win in most of the swing states. Trump is turning those swing states red. Before these elections, there were doubts about 13 swing states, including Texas, that has traditionally been to the Republicans. But of course, you see President Trump coming from nowhere to actually pick up. It was a real toss-up, I should say, in Texas. But of course, let's look at some of the critical states that are very pertinent to winning the elections right now between both candidates. Pennsylvania is really a state that we have to actually look into. Currently, the president is leading in that area, but the Democrats are very optimistic that most of the mail-in ballots will be in their favor. The president made that reference in the tweet he tweeted earlier that they are trying to steal the elections. As we heard from some of our sources right there in Pennsylvania, they've now paused the counting of the votes, hoping to continue in the next few hours. Perhaps the president is looking at that, that time of break that the election commission right there in Pennsylvania will be having before they resume, as maybe a threat or maybe something may really come in that is not eligible. But again, you see, when you sow doubts in the hearts of people definitely will want to react to that. But we hope that in the coming hour, in the coming days, when the every vote in Pennsylvania, because right now I think it boils down to Pennsylvania, it's looking very likely that Vice President Biden might pick up Michigan, though it's trailing right now. It's also looking likely that he may win Wisconsin by a slight margin. But right now, Pennsylvania is really a toss-up between both candidates.
Well, Rotimi, you are on the ground there. We have the battleground states: Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas, Florida, California. Well, California is traditionally Democrat, so it's safe for the Democrats. But, I mean, are you in a position right now to make a projection? We've been saying before now that, well, it's too early to still call the vote, even if Fox News is reporting that Vice President Biden already has 238, clearly ahead of President Trump. But what is your projection as someone who is on the ground there?
Well, the projection is that the vice president is actually flipping some red states to blue. States like Arizona, the vice president did tremendously well in the biggest county in Arizona, which makes him to obviously likely to pick up Arizona. I think that's why Fox and so many other news outlets are projecting Arizona for the vice president. He also did well in Minnesota, where Minnesota obviously is too close to cover. Again, he did tremendously well, but having said all of that, it's also too close to call to actually, look at President Trump as not being able to flip some of these counties, because we still have some counties who are traditionally red. The problem with the Democrats, as what some of the analysts have actually said, is that they did not do a lot of work in the suburbs. The suburbs is where you have the rural people that are traditionally Republican. The suburb is also where you have Latino voters. Latino voters this year constitute about, almost 17 to 20% of the total votes. That is the reason why the vice president lost Florida, because the biggest county in Florida, Miami-Dade, it was a real battle between him and the president. What happened in 2016, Hillary Clinton won that particular county with a wide margin, but the vice president did poorly against President Trump, and that's exactly how the Republicans are being, kind of hopeful that things could really be in their favor. And what we're going to be having most likely will be that Pennsylvania will now be the decider, not Florida this time.
Great stuff, Kari. Thank you so much for that. We also wanted to bring in Laurie Lade, our international correspondents, Laurie Lade and Dan Warren as well, to get their take on the latest in this nail-biting election. Laurie, Dan, how are you both doing? How are you seeing things so far?
Good morning, Redis.
Yeah, fine. Still awake, which is always a bonus at this time when you've been up all night.
Well, Laurie,
I think we've gone out
yesterday
the other
on the
side of it.
morning
If we
show,
don't make much sense, forgive us.
We hear you clearly. You guys are making a whole lot of sense. So, how do you folks see the race so far? We still on tender hooks as things stand right now.
Well, I mean, look, Rotimi gave a really good, indication of where things are. Things are still too close to call in some of those battleground states. And we spoke yesterday about Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan being these key states. Now, voting is about 2/3 of the way done, or counting is about 2/3 of the way done in those three states, but all are showing a lean toward Donald Trump, particularly in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has emerged as a real controversial state, not least because votes can be counted for the next 3 days. At the moment, with about 2/3 of the votes counted in Pennsylvania, 56% are favoring Donald Trump. That could change as the morning unfolds, but that is a pretty big lead for Donald Trump. So while Donald Trump is down in the electoral count, a lot of the states that have yet to be declared are leading toward Trump. And one real quick thing, and maybe we can explore this as the morning goes on, by my calculation, Joe Biden is up by 1.8 votes in the popular vote. So were we to have a case where, like in 2016, if the Democrat were to win the popular vote but not the electoral college vote, already the victor would be lacking validity, lacking a bit of a mandate, and there will be people who think because you didn't win the popular vote, you are not my president. I'll find it hard to throw my support to you.
well, Laurie, before we go to Dan Warren, you recall that yesterday on the morning show, I had asked you what was your projection. Are you in a better position now to make a projection as the situation unfolds?
You're not going to let me out of that, are you?
Oh, gosh.
At this point, looking at these key states and looking at all of them leading Trump at the moment, I feel it's more likely that we'll see a Trump victory than a Biden victory. But don't hold me to that. And if I weren't so tired, I may not have gone out on a limb there. But certainly it looks, from what the information that we have in front of us right now, Trump has an easier path right now than Biden does. Again, despite the fact that at the moment, Biden is leading in the electoral tally based on the states that have been called.
Dan, do you share that view? Dan?
Yeah, put him in the hot seat here.
See, I would actually agree with Laurie. In fact, when we started, which seems hours ago, we're sort of looking at the evidence, looking at the fact that the president did seem to be going into the election or into the polling day with momentum, and that's always a key point. If you were seen as the one with the most energized after, in effect, 18 months of campaigning, which it seemed, and it certainly feels like that, then quite frankly, you tend to have that upper hand. And I also think that there were certainly lots of people that have been asked by the polls many times what they think. And you certainly know that with a candidate such as Donald Trump, who is very controversial, that there will be people that would not admit to that in a poll. So I do think the polls weren't 100% accurate. Like, for example, Florida, Biden had been leading up to even yesterday. And it seems to be that the president's won that relatively comfortably. It doesn't even have to look like it's in a recount zone. So I would share that, Laurie, that I do. Yeah, so the two of us can go down together if we're in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So what does it say, Laurie and either of you can answer this. What does it say about the accuracy of the polls that 2 elections in a row Trump has defied them? Do pollsters have to go back and rethink their methodologies? Do they have to change their method? How they actually survey potential voters, registered voters? What does it say about the scientific method and the polls?
I think, hoping you agree with me again on this one.
We'll see.
But I think that polling for this particular election was always going to be suspect. Polls are only as good as the assumptions that you put in. We've never had a national election, one that's so tightly contested, in the middle of a pandemic, so many uncertainties. So the pollsters can only work with what they know. They can only work with history. They can try it. They can see perhaps the deficiencies in their models. They can try and compensate for that, but the polling was always going to be suspect in this then. That said, this isn't, the pollsters have been shown up as the real losers in some of these elections, not just the two presidential elections you mentioned, but also the Brexit vote in 2016.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem, that every time we get to an election, it's always the polls are wrong, the polls are wrong. I think that we're now when people are fighting an election campaign, whether it's the US presidential, whether it's Brexit, I think that one thing that hasn't been catered for is social media. I think that changes a lot of people's minds.
Without a doubt.
And therefore, people, they're worried, I think, also if their results get out, that they could be ridiculed on social media. They're also learning on social media. And we know that the facts aren't always right. So I think that has been a huge change, because no matter what the pollsters do, they just cannot seem to get it right. Having said that, if we look at 2016, they didn't predict a Trump victory. But if you looked at the popular vote, it was pretty much bang on the.
Absolutely, and the Electoral College does throw up some anomalies. It makes it more difficult to predict. Something else that is difficult with polling is extrapolating from people who respond to the polls. How likely are they to vote? And again, pollsters try and compensate for this. But I'm looking at some recaps. It looks like Latinos, particularly in the state of Florida, not so much in Arizona, which Joe Biden looks like he will carry, but it looks like Latinos pretty much in Florida split down the middle. A tiny bit over 50% for Biden, a tiny bit under 50% for Trump. I think that the polls may have been looking for Latinos to vote a lot more toward the Democrats than the Republicans. I'll be very interested to see where African Americans voted, not just who did they vote for, but how many turned out, because African American turnout was so very low in 2016, down almost 750,000 from 2012. Where did African Americans stand in this? So controlling for who turns up is a real challenge for pollsters.
Well, Laurie and Dan, yes, Vice President Biden is leading at this moment in terms of the Electoral College votes. But both of you say, well, it may go the other way. It's not over until it is over. But in neighboring Canada, in other parts of the world, there are persons who think that a Trump victory will constitute a disaster for the rest of the world. But Americans may well think differently. In all of this, does it really mean that international concerns mean nothing? Because after all, it's an American election. What do you think?
You want to take this one?
No, I think one of the biggest problems with this election is, if you look, for example, at the start, if we go back to almost the selection process, the Democrats, I think, in a way, didn't pick you're trying to pick a candidate that is supposedly the future, and you've actually picked the oldest candidate of all time. And if he wins, which he could still do, let's not write him off yet, the fact that he would be the oldest president sworn in. And I think if you look at the Democrats, I think the problem is they just get carried away with, you were sort of going through all the different categories of polling, and I think that this is the problem, that they're just too carried away with statistics. They're not actually thinking of what Americans are thinking of, and I think that's where Donald Trump seems to do very well, because he knows his audience. They're the people that want to drain the swamp. They don't like the establishment, and you couldn't have anyone more establishment than Joe Biden.
Absolutely, although I do think Donald Trump painting himself as an outsider is a little bit false. Yes, you've been president for 4 years. You can't say you're not a politician. But on that international question, it's worth pointing out that one of the things that Joe Biden has tended to specialize in, particularly when he was vice president to Barack Obama for those 8 years, is he really looked after the international side of things. That was where he felt comfortable. That was, to a certain extent, his specialty. He was involved with trade agreements. U.S. presidential elections are not one on foreign affairs. They just aren't. The last real foreign affairs president was George Bush, the older one, who was an ex-head of the CIA, had a lot of experience in foreign relations. Well, he was a one-term president. These are not immediate concerns that Americans have. So competency in foreign affairs is not something that is valued in a presidential campaign. So I think that if we have 4 more years under Donald Trump, and if we even have a President Biden, I think that whoever wins this election will be very much focused on domestic affairs.
Well, I mean, one of the issues we have talked about is COVID-19. And I've had some people, one of our colleagues, saying that this is a COVID-19 election. But the way the election is going, it looks like COVID-19, the fact that over 9 million persons in the United States have been infected and that over 230,000 have died, that doesn't seem to be a big issue. Laurie, what are the big issues that have determined what we're witnessing right now?
Look, that is an absolutely valid point, that we thought this would be the COVID election, and that is what the Democrats tried to keep at the top of their campaign. Donald Trump has bungled the response to COVID. Turn it over to us, and we will do what we can to constrain the virus. But things looked a little bit dubious for that strategy in some of the exit polls that came out when most of the polls were closing. CNN ran a couple of exit polls, and they asked voters, what do you think what is your biggest concern? About a third said, and a plurality said, it's the economy. COVID was down the list. Healthcare surprised me. Only 11% of voters said that healthcare was their issue of choice, their most important issue. I was surprised about that because, as you say, this was meant to be the COVID election. And I wondered if that would allow Americans to think about the healthcare system, which is dysfunctional for many Americans, those who don't benefit from employee-supplied plans. So when I saw that the economy was the biggest issue for many voters, it did strike me as that being a positive for Donald Trump. Most surveys show that voters across the political divide do regard Donald Trump as a stronger steward of the economy.
And so what do Democrats now do? Because Dan has already said that, one, they've had an issue with the type of candidate they put forward. 2, it looks like they've missed, if the numbers hold, it will look like they've missed the boat on the number 1 issue that they thought was going to make Trump vulnerable. So does the Democratic Party, if Joe Biden ends up losing this election, does the Democratic Party have to do some soul searching at this point?
You know, Redis, I think even if the Democratic Party wins, they have to do some soul searching. This is a pretty disunited Democratic Party, and many Democrats did not favor Joe Biden. Remember, he came out of nowhere to win the primary. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were really leading the charge in the early primary races. Those two candidates for Democratic nominee are very far to the left of the Democratic Party, and uniting moderate Democrats with progressive Democrats is something that the party is going to have to do. I don't know.
Yeah,
you were on that, Dan.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I also think that the Republican Party also has got some soul searching because they're a party divided. You've got some real big, prominent people in the party that have been endorsing Joe Biden. So I actually think American politics is at a very interesting crossroads. And if President Trump does get a second term, we will know that in 2024 it's a clean slate for both sides, and it will be, I think both sides have to go to the drawing board, because when you've got people like Colin Powell saying vote for Joe Biden, there's something quite not right about that.
But it's interesting. The Republicans, I think, were more disciplined about keeping their message straight. It was people like Colin Powell, who didn't have a whole lot of skin in the game, Cindy McCain, John McCain's widow, who vocally supported Joe Biden, but you didn't see very many serving Republican legislators break with their party boss. They seem scared to step out of line. A lot of them may not agree with Donald Trump, but they weren't prepared to say so publicly. There's more discipline in the Republican, where the Democrats are really running the gamut, and at certain points in the primary, we're in open warfare.
Well, I mean, there was just too many on stage, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie Lade. Thank you, Dan Warren. We'll come back to you in due course. We're focusing on this subject the whole day. We'll take a short break now. We're expecting President Donald Trump's address shortly. Welcome back to the Arise News channel and our special coverage of the American election, America Decides, with Rutus Odiri and Rufai Hussaini here in Lagos, Rotimi Kade in the United States, and also Dan Warren and Laurie Lade covering the proceedings. Now we're going straight to the White House, where President Trump is expected to speak shortly, following that other address by Vice President Biden, telling his supporters to remain very hopeful. Meanwhile, South Dakota, President Trump has taken South Dakota with 3 electoral votes, with 64.2% reported so far. In California, the Democrats have taken the House. Ruda, who is their candidate, with 53.8%, leading with 79% of the votes counted so far. So we'll take that statement from President Trump. Well, we're still waiting.
Yes,
but what do you expect that President Trump will say?
It is going to be interesting to see if what he says, Dr. and Rufai, and to see if what the President Trump says is an extension of his tweets. Because his tweets, again, if you look at the accusations of him being divisive, saying they're trying to steal the election, we're already ahead in the polls, and then saying no ballot should be counted after election. And yeah, there it is. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. Yeah, but they are postmarked, and that's what the president knows. This is part of the law. So we will see if his speech is in line with that. But this is it here. This is the all-important map. This, again, the safe states, your Washington, Oregon, California, deep blue, showing that, it projected that Biden is going to take it. Arizona is already light blue, but it looks like it looks like
it's
Trump.
Blue. It's blue.
Biden is going to flip this. This was a state that Trump won. This was a war of attrition here, where Biden's job was to take states that Trump took in 2016. I understand that Georgia is now getting a bit tight. 91% of the precincts reporting now. But
Georgia is likely to go Trump.
Trump is because it's been a Republican state, but it has become competitive. Also, look, North Carolina is still lean Trump, but it is looking like it's going to take it. Doctor, this is the Rust Belt. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. If Biden does not get the support that he needs from those mail-in banners coming in, that's all.
Well, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania may well, at the end of the day, determine who wins the election.
Indeed.
This time around. But I mean, for the benefit of our viewers in Africa, it's not the number of red or the number of blue. What matters is the electoral vote at the end of the day. Rufai, what do you think?
I mean, you are very right when you say it's the electoral vote that matters at the end of the day. But when you take a look at those Rust Belt states, those states have always determined the elections. I remember 2012. I waited. Once they called Pennsylvania, I knew Obama was home and dry. You have to win those states. I think it's Ohio. No person has gone ahead to win the presidency of America without winning Ohio in a very long while. Trump has. I think the last time was from the time of John Kennedy in the 60s. Trump has been able to successfully win Ohio, take one of those very big punchy states. Obviously, we know California definitely is a safe zone for the Democrats, just like New York. New York is another big state, 29 electoral college votes, but those are safe zones for the Democrat. But most importantly, those hard-hitting states. And let's see, the Biden team said, let's wait. When the mail-in votes finally are counted, things can flip for him in Pennsylvania. He needs Pennsylvania. Since he wasn't able to pull it out, while Rotimi was talking about that, I don't think the Biden team did a good job with the Latino voters, because the Latino voters are the rural counties, in Florida, and he didn't do a good job with them, so he couldn't get them out to be able to get the votes. But the fact that shocks me is the fact that Trump has been able to consolidate a great deal. In all fairness to Trump, look at the numbers now. I am sure, correct me if I'm wrong, that Trump has got close to 60 million now in terms of popular vote numbers. And he only got 63 million the last time in the election. So he's been able to win a lot of popular votes. He's been able to win by good margins. People in the rural areas are voting for Trump. There was a big tussle about the suburban women. A lot of them too are coming out for Trump in this. Win or lose for Trump, he's going to do, quite well in this election. And it's quite cautious optimism for me, but I think I would like to align with Laurie Lade, by saying, I think Trump has an easier path to get all of this. And when you see, once the voting tally pretty much goes beyond 50% most of the time, once it goes beyond 50% of votes counted, it doesn't really flip that much. Look at Ohio. Before Ohio flipped, Joe Biden was doing well in Ohio, but that was before the 50% mark. All of a sudden, things flipped, and you can see that Trump just trended his way down.
Okay, we'll go to Rotimi now. He's waiting in New York. And by the way, Ilhan Omar has won re-election from Minnesota.
The Minnesota representative, yes.
District. She's won. She was able to beat African-American challenger. And Ilhan Omar, well, should I say good friend of President Trump.
A constant target of Donald Trump.
But Rotimi Kade, we're back to you. So what is the update that you have for us as the results come in? And it looks like Biden is still ahead, but we've just been told that anything could change before we get to the end of the day and the counts.
Right now we're still monitoring some of the counties, the rural areas, because it's very, very important. And I want to quickly buttress what Vi said earlier, about the Democrats, I should say, not really doing a very good job in pulling out their supporters. Also, they've not also done a very good job in terms of the African Americans. We've seen many African-American voters tilting towards the Republican Party. And the answer is very simple. It has to do with the economy. President Trump has promised that he's going to cut more taxes for the rural people, and businesses is going to boom. I think the strategy of the Democratic Party in terms of using coronavirus as an excuse to get the president out is actually not really in their favor, because people are more concerned about the economy and they feel that the president can do a better job than Joe Biden. And the reason, I believe, why we're seeing this surprise turn around in most of it, because if you look at it, the polls actually said that with the coronavirus, with the extent of the damage that has been done to the economy, with what we've seen so far, the rate of hospitalization, with also the number of deaths in the United States, they feel the president has not done a good job, and that will count in this election. But apparently, the people are not looking at that. It's now reflecting that people are more concerned about the economy, and they feel that the president, despite all his promises on coronavirus, curtailing it, is not been able to do that. But again, they feel that we can do a better job when it comes to the economy. That's number one. Number two is that most of those rural counties are not being approached by the Democratic Party in a way to promise them that they can actually deliver. Joe Biden actually promised that anybody who earn less than $400,000 a year will definitely not have tax increase. They will not have their tax, increased, and only billionaires or millionaires will definitely have higher taxes. At this time of the pandemic, a lot of people don't even have money. A lot of people can't pay their rent. The stimulus package is still pending in Congress. They just feel like imposing taxes on them at this time would definitely not be a smart thing. though this deficit, when you talk about the budget deficit, is skyrocketing, and the Republican Party believe that they can still, ensure that people have a lot of money to play around with, unlike the Democrats who are more concerned about bringing down the deficit. So it's a whole lot going on, but it's more economic than the health the health situation we've seen in the country so far.
Thank you, Rotimi. I want to bring in Laurie Lid and Dan Warren, our international correspondent. Laurie, we played a clip, this was about a week or two ago, on the campaign trail of Donald Trump when he said, "Suburban women, will you please like me?" And it was suggested, Laurie, that suburban women were turned off by Trump and they were going to show up in big numbers on the election. Now, if it turns out that he ends up winning, what does that say? That was another mistake, or rather a wrong analysis of how suburban women viewed him, or he was just able to turn out more white males?
I see where you're trying to lead me, and this is dangerous ground, Rodas. Absolutely dangerous ground. And the other thing that he said at a rally in Pennsylvania, which was really quite jaw-dropping for women who work, which is over half of the female workforce in the U.S., he said, "I saved your husband's jobs. Vote for me. I'm rescuing the economy so that your husbands can go to work." And I think a lot of women sort of rolled their eyes at that. We don't have any sense of where suburban women came, we know that white college-educated women were really turned off by Trump's message. What we don't know at this early stage is how they voted. Did they vote against him? Did they vote at all? Those sorts of granular level statistics we can't see at the moment. But certainly those were comments on the campaign trail that made that rankled with a lot of women. Certainly, it looks like at the moment that Donald Trump is in a better position to take the Electoral College than is Joe Biden. So if those comments turned off educated women, college-educated women, it didn't turn off enough of them to prevent Donald Trump being in a reasonable position to remain in the White House. And just I'm looking at in the break, just a quick tally of votes. At the moment, we've got Joe Biden still winning the electoral tally with 224 votes, Donald Trump at 213. But I've tallied up the states that are leaning one way or the other. If we add in the states that at the moment haven't been called but are leaning toward Biden, and that is Nevada and Arizona, that would give Biden 241, less than that 270. If we count in all of the states that haven't been declared yet but are leaning at the moment toward Trump, which is Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, that would take Donald Trump to 290. That would get him over that magic 270 level. Now, I have to say, big caveat with those numbers I'm giving you. Some of those numbers come from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, where we're voting, only about 2/3 of votes have been tallied. So there could be some potential for surprises in those votes.
Yeah, but Laurie Lade, California has not been called yet. So if the Democrats take California, would that projection still work out?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, you're right. I have included California in my tally for Biden because, in my mind, there was no chance that anyone other than Biden would win that state. So we're still, I mean, it still is too close to call, but in the key states that one or the other has to win, and again, I'm talking mostly about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, at the moment, they are leaning toward Trump. And in the case of Pennsylvania, leaning quite heavily toward Trump.
Well, Dan Warren, we're expecting President Donald Trump to speak shortly, a form of response to the earlier address by Vice President Joe Biden. What do you think we're likely to hear from him? Is he still going to talk about stealing or make a divisive statement, or just as Biden did, try to give hope to his supporters?
I think his statement will be reaching out to the people that voted for him. I think he's more than likely to almost replicate what Biden said. Biden said we've got this. I'm quite happy where we are. I think Trump will say that, but in his own way, which will probably be divisive and will possibly alienate half the electorate. But he will probably say that. Move on from the tweet that he said about people are trying to steal the election. I would imagine there'll be something like that in there. When he makes a speech, he's certainly going to make sure that he gets all of the headline press when he finally does speak. So, yeah, divisive, certainly reaching out to his core audience. And I do think there'll be a hint of a victory speech about it. He's been quite quiet up to this point, so
that would be my guess. But I'm just looking at the headlines. He has tweeted this morning, after a period of relative quiet for Donald Trump. He tweeted, "We are up big," the word "big" in capital letters, but they are trying to steal again in capital letters. They are trying to steal the election. So, despite the fact that I think the night is going better than he would have anticipated, he's still in this defensive posture. That may give us a clue of how he may play this briefing. But with all things with Donald Trump, things are scheduled. He tends to be late. And
I think one thing he's got into his advantage when he makes his speech is that he has, to a degree, outperformed some of the pollsters already. States that were supposedly, like Texas, was going to be the new California for the Democrats.
Georgia was meant to be a lot tighter than it.
So I think that he will have those where he knows that he has defied expectations already, but clearly at this time of the morning, he hasn't defied them enough for a red wave that he was predicting, and he was saying so. But I do think that there will be some form of victory in there. There's bound to be.
Yeah, although I do think that there'll be some spite in there as well. And leaving open the question, I think this is something to be discussed not for now, but in the hours ahead. How do people on the street react? Regardless of who wins the election, roughly half of the electorate, is going to feel robbed. What happens next?
Great question. What happens next? But actually, we're all, and Dan Warren, Laurie Lid, our international correspondents. I still want to throw this to the both of you, and you can take this one at a time. The narrative here, we're all speaking along the lines of a likely or possible Trump victory. If Biden turns this around and those mail-in votes come in and the blue wall stands strong, what then is the narrative? Do we no longer say this was about not the oldest candidate of all time? You didn't work too hard on the Hispanic voters. What then becomes the narrative if Biden flips this and ends up winning?
I think here's where we've both been up a long time. I think the answer to that question, Rodas, depends on what happens in the Senate. We're pretty clear that the House of Representatives will remain under Democratic control. The Democrats had hoped not only to win the White House, but to also flip the Senate. They haven't had control of the Senate for 6 years. They needed to win 4 seats to take control. That is not looking great at this moment. From my calculations, they have won 2, but they dropped 1 in Alabama. Their hopes, and there will be at least 1 runoff in the Georgia election, potentially 2 runoffs in Georgia. So we may not have a vote in the Senate until after those runoffs in Georgia on January 3rd. But at the moment, it looks like the Democrats have come up short for their bid to gain the Senate. So we will have, regardless of who wins the presidency, there's a pretty good chance that we will have a divided Congress. That means more legislative gridlock, and I think that means whoever becomes president, we're going to see a lot more recourse to executive action, executive orders, to get anything done.
Well, Laurie and Dan, is there the possibility of this election becoming inconclusive? And that's a very popular phrase here in Nigeria. Could that happen? And if that happens, what will follow?
We were discussing this earlier. I mean, technically it can go to a tie, which then it goes down to, is it Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, and that's certainly when the 4,000 lawyers from one side and probably another 4,000 from the other side, that's certainly when it would be the lawyers taking over. I mean, I think it's got to be a certain configuration, I think we've actually passed that where somebody's going to win this, but it would likely be a wafer thin margin. It won't be a landslide like either the party was suggesting.
And I do suspect that we will have a winner by the end of the week. I don't think this will be as tight as we were, as many people were fearing, regardless of whether you have the skin in the game for one candidate or the other. I don't think many people wanted to see a disputed election. I don't think people wanted to see an election decided by the judiciary again, as we had in 2000. I feel that as we see more and more results, that is less and less likely.
Yeah, and I think because the Biden campaign have said that if it was quite obvious that they had lost, they would concede relatively quickly, although Hillary Clinton did say her first bit of advice to Biden was don't concede till you're ready. If it's a Biden victory, then it will take a bit long, but I believe the president is almost about to speak now, and the Trump family, none of them wearing masks, I see, which was one of the biggest criticisms during the campaign.
The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
I appreciate it very much. And I want to thank the American people for their tremendous support. Millions and millions of people voted for us tonight. And a very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people. And we won't stand for it. Yeah. Celebration. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off. The results tonight have been phenomenal, and we are getting ready. I mean, literally, we were just all set to get outside and just celebrate something that was so beautiful, so good. Such a vote, such a success. The citizens of this country have come out in record numbers. This is a record. There's never been anything like it. To support our incredible movement, we won states that we weren't expected to win. Florida, we didn't win it. We won it by a lot. And we won the great state of Ohio. We won Texas. We won Texas by 700,000 votes, and they don't even include it in the tabulations. It's also clear that we have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5% or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. Likewise, we've clearly won North Carolina, where we're up 1.4% or 77,000 votes with only approximately 5% left. They can't catch us. We also, if you look and you see, Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. But certainly there were a lot of votes out there that we could get, because we're now just coming into what they call Trump territory. I don't know what you call it, but these were friendly Trump voters, and that could be overturned. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight, he said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely? And we don't even need it. We don't need that. That was just a state that if we would have gotten it, it would have been nice, Arizona. But there's a possibility, maybe even a good possibility. In fact, since I saw that originally, it's been changed and the numbers have substantially come down just in a small amount of votes. So we want that obviously to stay in play. But most importantly, we're winning Pennsylvania by a tremendous amount of votes. We're up 600. Think of this. Think of this. Think of this. We're up 690,000 votes in Pennsylvania. 690,000. These aren't even close. It's not like, oh, it's close. With 64% of the vote in, it's going to be almost impossible to catch. And we're coming into good Pennsylvania areas where they happen to like your president. I mean, it's like very good. So we'll probably expand that. We're winning Michigan, but I'll tell you, I looked at the numbers. I said, whoa. I said, wow, that's a lot. By almost 300,000 votes, and 65% of the vote is in. And we're winning Wisconsin, so we're winning. We don't need all of them. We need, because when you add Texas in, which wasn't added, I spoke with the really wonderful governor of Texas just a little while ago, and Greg Abbott, he said, congratulations. He called me to congratulate me on winning Texas. I mean, we won Texas. I don't think they finished quite the tabulation, but there's no way. And it was almost complete, but he congratulated me. Then he said, by the way, what's going on? I've never seen anything like this. Can I tell you what? Nobody has. So we won by 107,000 votes with 81% of the vote. That's Michigan. So when you take those three states in particular, and you take all of the others, I mean, we have so many, we had such a big night. You just take a look at all of these states that we've won tonight, and then you take a look at the kind of margins that we've won them by. And all of a sudden, it's not like we're up 12 votes and we have 60% left. We won states, and all of a sudden, I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh, because you know what happened? They knew they couldn't win. So they said, let's go to court. And did I predict this, Newt? Did I say this? I've been saying this from the day I heard they were going to send out tens of millions of ballots. I said exactly, because either they were going to win, or if they didn't win, they'll take us to court. So Florida was a tremendous victory, 377,000. Texas, as we said. Ohio, think of this. Ohio, a tremendous state, a big state. I love Ohio. We won by 8.1%, 461,000. Think of it. Almost 500,000 votes. North Carolina, big victory with North Carolina. And so we won there. We lead by 76,000 votes with almost nothing left. And all of a sudden, everything just stopped. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment. And we will win this. And we, as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. So I just want to thank you. And I want to thank all of our support. I want to thank all of the people that worked with us. And Mr. Vice President, say a few words, please. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to join you in thanking more than 60 million Americans who have already cast their vote for 4 more years for President Donald Trump in the White House. And while the votes continue to be counted, we're going to remain vigilant, as the President said. The right to vote has been at the center of our democracy since the founding of this nation, and we're going to protect the integrity of the vote. But I really believe with all of my heart, with the extraordinary margins, Mr. President, that you've inspired in the states that you just described, and the way that you launched this movement across the country to make America great again, I truly do believe, as you do, that we are on the road to victory and we will make America great again. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so you're watching Arise News live. Of course, Rotu Sodiri, myself with Dr. Ruben Abati, Laurie Lay, Dan Warren, our international correspondents, Rotimi Kande, also Rufai Hosseini. All of us here, we just heard from President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., and there is a lot to unpack with what President Donald Trump has just said, because this now sheds some new light as onto strategy and what the outcome could possibly be in those states. Rufai, I want to bring you in on what we just heard from the president. Can I please get your reaction? Because there's a lot to talk about here.
I mean, the scoop was correct. Axiom was correct. They read this directly that he was going to come out and, declare sort of like an early victory, put the wheels among the spanners, ensure that he incites the American people and say, oh, there is voter fraud, they want to steal your vote. Exactly what he has done. And in fact, what he's done, he's come out to draw the battle line. And he's saying, we're going to go to court. Don't come and put these votes in, despite the fact that there was a court injunction that they got from a state Supreme Court that said they can actually count those votes. But Trump has come out to say, definitely, we're going to go to court. You hear what he said there? Underline Trump's words. He said, this is a fraud on the American public. So that's how a populist talk. A populist, or popolare, like the Italians will call them, they will come out, they will tell the public that, oh, this is being done against you. You can see that the words of Mike Pence was different. He said, we are on the road to victory. We should get there. But guess what Trump said? Oh, I could as well say safely that, Mr. President, congratulations, you've won the elections. That's what Trump is saying there. So he has drawn the battle line. Let me tell you what this reminds me of. This reminds me of Roger Stone. Roger Stone was a key character in the Florida recount in the year 2000. It's going to go down to the wires. The Democratic Party should be careful. They're going to go all out to the court. Hopefully this doesn't generate, but Trump stands a better chance to win this. And honestly, the Democratic Party have not done their homework tonight.
Thanks, Rufai. Rotimi, please, I want to bring you in. What do you think of what we just heard from President Donald Trump? The results are not... Go ahead. Okay. Dan, Laurie, please come on in and give us. Let's hear from Dan and Laurie. I really want to get your take, you both, on what we just heard from the president, please.
Hi, Laurie and Dan.
That's all I can say.
What?
I said he would possibly say something victory and something maybe slightly controversial. He literally ticked every box that I said.
Yeah, you called that one. Donald Trump opened by saying, that the Democrats are a very sad group of people. They are trying to disenfranchise. And then he sort of, stumbled off there. We won't stand for that. It is a absolutely remarkable statement for somebody who's exceeding expectations. At the moment, by my calculations, it looks like Trump has a better chance of winning. This is not a done deal. But on a good night for the Republicans, no matter how you slice it, they have done better than national polling would have suggested. Yet Donald Trump is saying he wants to contest the result. It's truly bizarre.
And so,
and the fact that...
I want to bring up the map.
The fact that courts are already now being discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to bring up the map, Doctor. And Laurie and Dan, does this suggest, again, looking at the three outstanding states, so again, we're waiting on Pennsylvania, we're waiting on Michigan, we're waiting on Wisconsin. Does this suggest that Donald Trump is not as confident in the results? Because Laurie, as you said, he's having a good night. The results look good. He should just say, okay, well, we're having a good night. We'll see what happens. Based on what he just said, does this suggest that these three states, it's still possible that they could flip to former Vice President Joe Biden?
Yeah, I suspect that is the case. And I suspect Donald Trump is creating a scenario so that he has never been happy with the fact that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has allowed ballots that are received for 3 days after the third can be counted as valid ballots. Donald Trump has never liked this. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that these ballots were acceptable. That case went to the federal Supreme Court. They ruled that a 4-4 tie. That means that in the case of a Supreme Court tie, the ruling reverts back to what the state court said. And I suspect Donald Trump wants to revive that legal challenge in case these early votes that have yet to be counted, in case they do not go his way. He may be thinking there is now a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. 2 members are beholden to me. 3 members are beholden to me. Maybe if this goes back to the Supreme Court, if I can get the Supreme Court to hear this Pennsylvania case again, it may go my way. He has said we've already won, and Donald Trump would love for the counting to stop right now. The counting as it stands right now is in his favor. But I think it does suggest, and he said, we're going to have the courts take a look at this. It may be that the Trump administration is preparing another submission to the Supreme Court to take another look at the ruling in Pennsylvania. And the Supreme Court said that they were willing to take another look at this, that this was not a done deal.
And also just to say the margins he was talking about were nothing in scale of the amount of ballots still to go. I mean, 600,000 in Pennsylvania is nothing, really.
Absolutely. There's an electorate of more than 10 million. So, things could go. I think this is a preemptive strike in case things change. He's very happy with where things are now.
Warming up the fan base, getting the troops ready, essentially. That's what he's doing.
Well, Laurie Lade, I like that phrase, preemptive strike. And isn't that what all politicians do? Politicians are optimistic till the very last moment. And that's what we've seen with Joe Biden. And that's what we've seen with President Trump. President Trump has taken some of the key states, Ohio, Florida, Texas, and he claims he's doing well in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin and Michigan, states that will probably at the end of the day determine the election. But what we have seen is that the knockout punch that we were expecting from the Democrats, that has not happened. And so I don't think we can jump to any conclusions yet as to the outcome of this. And as you said, preemptive strike, the Republicans are already prepared to contest this election all the way to the Supreme Court. If that happens, then of course it will mean that the United States will be in a bind while that election is being contested. And that was why I asked you the question earlier about the possibility of having an inconclusive election where you then have a situation maybe the House of Representatives would have to step in and determine the outcome of the election eventually.
And Dan and Laurie, I also wanted to throw this in. I'm not a lawyer. We're not lawyers here. But what are the chances of the Supreme Court? We're just speculating here. I don't want to put you on the spot. But what are the chances of the Supreme Court overturning what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had already ruled with respect to those extra ballots being allowed, at least postmarked until after the election, being allowed to be counted. Is there a chance that that can be overturned and extend the drama even further?
I think there is always a chance, and those later votes, those late arriving votes, will be sequestered in case they are the subject of a legal challenge. But the Supreme Court has seemed to be reluctant to reverse rulings made at state Supreme Court level. They seem to want to allow that to be the arbiter of state electoral law. So while the Supreme Court did reserve the right to revisit the Pennsylvania ruling, they really have shown themselves to be reluctant to tinker with state law. So I would be surprised if they revisit it. But as you rightly say, I do not have a law degree. I can just tell you about the patterns. I'm going to go, Ruben, with I do not think this will be a contested election. I do think we'll have a winner sooner rather than later. But
well, thank you, Laurie.
I think
thank you, Dan.
the Supreme Court.
Yeah, Michael Wilson is joining us right now.
Yes, from the UK.
Michael Wilson from the UK. Michael, good morning.
Morning. Morning. I'll just stay away from the election just for a moment because there's a big business story I need to draw your attention to that happened yesterday, which is that the Chinese government and banking regulators pulled Ant Financial's IPO in Hong Kong. Jack Ma was trying to say that it's a technical company, it's not a financial company, well, of course we know it's a fintech company, and Alibaba stock actually went down hugely. That's the big business story, really, which is bubbling overnight. You're talking about legal action. I suspect there'll be a lot more of that as far as that's concerned. So basically what happened yesterday was there's like this, they call it the blue wave trade that financial markets were kind of filling their boots with yesterday. And that certainly fired Wall Street and so on. But we're seeing, of course, that we know it, don't we? The pollsters didn't get it right. And it's very, very different indeed. Early Asia trade was relatively muted, but the Nikkei jumped a bit. So the expectation of that big blue wave that rapidly evaporated. Investors were going on the fact that there'd be a Democratic sweep and that Joe Biden could ease the political risk. And what that did was that fueled a huge jump into financial stocks and into the dollar and so on. But with Trump winning Florida, Ohio, Biden waiting on the Midwest, and you've drawn our attention, of course, to those Rust Belt states, the Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Should say about those states, though, that Trump won those unexpectedly in 2016. So there's a lot to play for. As far as Europe and the UK is concerned, once again, everything stormed ahead because of election fever and all the rest of it for the reasons I've just actually mentioned there. But from an economic point of view, and we should always, elections are one thing, but the basics in Europe, it's going to get a lot worse over the next few weeks because of all the lockdowns, particularly in the UK. Those come into effect at midnight tonight. And as far as Europe is concerned, no more stimulus packages, I'm guessing, and whether or not we're going to see the coronavirus stimulus package actually being resolved in the United States, which does have the markets here quite concerned. I don't know about that. Commodities, oil higher, but that's about OPEC plus, really. Rumours spread that Russia and Saudi Arabia were actually going to hold back on the proposed January increases in oil production. That would, of course, mean a rise in the oil price, and it has. And gold really has hitched a ride with equities, and people are actually into that. It's about $19.35 an ounce now. Will it test $2,000 an ounce? May well do. Depends on risk as we come up. That really is the global view. But as far as the election's concerned, yes, what a knife edge, and how curious to have President Trump, as Laurie was saying, say that we've actually won. I don't think you have.
Indeed, exactly.
But Michael Wilson, how are the markets or market watchers, how are they reacting? Because it looks like the markets have just concluded, like Laurie laid, that a Trump win is given.
Yeah, well, I don't think they are. I think what they're doing is I'm divided as to whether whoever gets in will have an immediate effect on the markets. The fact of the matter is the most important player in this, and I'm sure Laurie would agree with me, is the Fed in the United States, and that will we're going to be listening to their minutes today. They will be accommodative as far as the markets are concerned, and assets and equities will bounce ahead. So I think the markets really would just like some kind of certainty rather than worrying about who's going to do it. You could marginally say that Joe Biden may be spending more on green projects, maybe spending more on infrastructure, thus increasing employment. But I think that's still all to play for. I think what you're seeing, and again, I bow to Laurie's opinion about this, but it is an amazingly divided country, the United States, and this election will do nothing to stop that.
Thank you so much. Michael, I wanted to ask about the stimulus. You know, of course, that that's been protracted. They've delayed it until after the election. So what are the chances of this? That's in the U.S. now. What are the chances of stimulus passing, I guess, depending on whether or not Trump wins re-election? Are we back to the gridlock between him, Steve Mnuchin, Nancy Pelosi, Democrats and Republicans? Are we back to square one?
I think we are back to it for a number of reasons, not just the political ones. But the fact is that if there is any slight improvement in the US economy, and rather bizarrely, there seems to be that GDP figures are good. We're going to get those for the final quarter at the end of December. That will make very interesting viewing. But I think what we're generally seeing is that people are looking at or rather politicians are looking at the US economy and saying, do you know what? I don't actually think we need that generous a stimulus package right now. Now, if the Senate becomes clear-cut politically to the favor of the Democrats, then I think we will see a big package there. If not, then I suspect these deliberations will just continue. Whether or not, if President Trump or present President Trump actually wins and starts to helicopter money into people's pockets, he might well feel that. But I wouldn't. If I'd won, I'd be thinking about very, very different things right now and how the balance of the world is changing. There's a lot of work to be done as far as China's concerned, a lot of work to be done as far as trade's concerned, never mind the rebuilding of the economy, and never mind putting money in the pockets of American voters, because the election will have been over by then.
In fact, Michael, I'm so glad you brought up the issue of trade. We do know that the United States held up the formal confirmation of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as Director General of the WTO. There were whispers that the WTO was cautiously optimistic that Biden would be elected maybe tonight, tomorrow, and then he would be more favorable to Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala becoming Director General. With Trump's attitude to the WTO, if he were to win re-election, what does the future look like for the WTO? Are they biting their nails right now?
Yeah, I would imagine they are. He's very critical, as you quite rightly say, and we've often talked about this, haven't we? He's been very critical of the role of the World Trade Organization, and he's very critical of the role that it doesn't seem to take as far as China's concerned. There are all sorts of big issues there. I was actually very surprised to learn from your program yesterday that the WTO was using the lack of the ability to have face-to-face discussions because of the virus as an excuse. They were saying that they're going to put off that coronation for some time because of the virus. I don't find that's a terrible excuse. I mean, we are talking, are we not, down the internet right now? We're watching the US election down the internet right now. What's the big deal with the WTO? She should be in that job right now, and she should be coming to terms with the new shape of the world that's going to happen one way or the other. It doesn't matter who wins the US election. She needs to be doing that right now. The world needs her to be in that job. That's my view. She's eminently experienced to do it. She's a tough nut. Well, get on with it, is what I would say.
Michael Wilson, there was a question I asked Laurie Lade and Dan Warren earlier, that the way this election is going in the United States, it looks like the rest of the world. We were just bothering ourselves unnecessarily. In Europe, support for Donald Trump is below 24%. In Africa, maybe in Nigeria, Kenya, yes, he has some support. In the Middle East, in Israel, in Asia, maybe in the Philippines. And yet the whole world has been excited and disturbed about this election. But at the end of the day, it looks like we just bother ourselves outside, America for nothing. we don't have a say in the matter, and it's like America remains on its own. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think America is very much on its own, but it is the world's, as we understand it. I would contest the figures slightly, but at the moment we're still looking upon it as the world's largest economy. Nothing of what you've just said actually factors in China into all that. That to me is the most important unknown country. That to me will be the largest economy, no question about that. And Africa, if you want to talk about Africa, and you know much more about it than I do, but their relationship with China is something that they will be much more interested to discuss, I think, than any relationship with the United States. Has any African country seen a huge visit from any of America's senior politicians recently? Don't think so.
Good point, Michael. And we just want to bring our viewers in again on the map and the state of things as of right now. Again, we just heard President Donald Trump complaining about counting being halted. 213 electoral votes is where he's at, 224 for Joe Biden. And again, just for our viewers, these three key states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, again, really incredible speech from President Donald Trump saying that they're going to go to court when these figures aren't in yet. But the election looks like it hinges on those three, and we'll see how the mailing ballot is coming, if it's going to be contested, Doctor. It's got
let's go to Rufai.
Yes,
Rufai,
Rufai.
what's your take on all of these issues that we've been discussing with Michael Wilson, Laurie Lade, and Dan Warren?
Okay, so I had a couple of things to say. At first, Rotus, from what I understand, any decision made by a state Supreme Court in America concerning state laws, you cannot really change it. You cannot really change it. In fact, the Supreme Court totally supports the state Supreme Court when the matter has to do with a state law in America. So I want to see the way the Supreme Court would tilt towards this concerning the case, and we all know the antecedent of the Supreme Court with Amy Coney Barrett just passing before the elections. Let's see how it plays out, but I don't really think Trump can change it. Secondly, I want to talk about the economy and the dynamics of all of this. Dr. Abati, you made a very valid point. Maybe we care too much about America, and maybe America really doesn't really care too much about what the world thinks about it. All it knows is it's a superpower, it can muscle its way through and do what it wants to do. A great case in point is the WTO. The world now has to wait for America to make a decision as regards the WTO before we move ahead. We know we're just let me use the American term, we're just lying or shellacking when we say that, it's because of coronavirus that we are waiting to be able to coronate Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And to a large extent, this speaks volumes. And Michael did say something. I think we should also be looking at China too, because China is going to be that very big, buoyant economy. But the funny part is, the Chinese do not have open elections like this, so we can't get to monitor the Chinese election. You never know what might happen someday soon.
Well, thank you very much, Rufai Oseni. Thank you, Michael Wilson. Are you still with us?
I am.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to say anything further with regard to what Rufai Oseni just said?
I would absolutely underline that the important thing for Africa, and again, I'm not in Africa, and I don't wish to speak on its behalf, but I'm looking at the world globally, as it were. I don't think the United States is much of a player as far as Africa's future is concerned. It's much more about China. I think we're right to look at these elections, but the only people that are going to get rich from this, and of course, in all financial stories, all you have to do is follow the money. And the money is going to go to the lawyers who are no doubt sharpening their pencils or firing up whatever they fire up, their calculators and their laptops, to get to grips with this. It will be contested. I'm certain about it one way or the other. It's sad, but that's the way it is. We're looking at a very, very divided nation. And I think that's a great shame. As far as China's concerned, how do we know? We've got no idea what goes on there. We see it as a sort of shining beacon of growth, where the rest of the world's in a kind of self-imposed recession because of the pandemic. I would suggest that Africa should be much more concerned about China rather than the United States. But then again, we do look at an election. We look at it with interest because it is the most powerful economic power in the world as we speak. But things will change.
Thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Our Rice News coverage of the American presidential election, America Decides 2020, continues. Rotus, Rufai. We'll take a short break now. When we return, America Decides 2020 will continue on Arise News.